unearthed from the shadows of the 13th century. An ancient ring whispers secrets of a forgotten time. When a man inherits this cursed relic, he's hurled back to the harrowing days of the Black Death, trapped in a world ravaged by plague and despair. His only ticket home is stolen. Now he must navigate a labyrinth of terror and time, facing a fate more horrifying than death itself. Will he escape the clutches of the past, or become a permanent victim of history's darkest hour? Tune in and witness the chilling saga of the Ring of the Plagued Past. The rain pattered gently against the windows of the old study, where Daniel sat surrounded by stacks of musty books and artifacts, remnants of a life spent in pursuit of history's secrets. His uncle, Gerald, had been a man of peculiar habits and even more peculiar collections. It was in this room, amidst the lingering scent of aged paper and leather, that Daniel had spent countless hours as a child, listening to Gerald's tales of ancient civilizations and long-forgotten lore. Gerald had passed away 2 weeks ago, leaving his entire estate to Daniel. As his only living relative and a fellow history enthusiast, it seemed only fitting. The lawyer, Mr. Higgins, had been explicit. Everything in the old house was now Daniel's. Yet, as he sifted through the collections, a sense of unease crept over him. Gerald had always been a bit of an enigma, often disappearing for months on end, returning with new artifacts and wild stories about their origins. On the oak desk, among a pile of dusty tomes, Daniel found a small, ornate box. It was different from the rest of Gerald's collection. There was a certain air of mystery about it that piqued his curiosity. The wood was old, darkened by age, with intricate carvings that seemed to dance in the dim light. It was secured with an iron clasp, worn with time. Daniel hesitated for a moment before opening it. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, lay a silver ring. Its band was adorned with strange inscriptions, symbols that Daniel couldn't immediately place. It looked ancient, possibly from the mid-13th century, judging by the style. He recalled Gerald mentioning something about a family heirloom once, a piece said to be steeped in legend and mystery. Could this be it? As he picked up the ring, a chill ran down his spine. It felt heavier than it looked, and unnervingly cold to the touch. The inscription was in an old dialect, possibly Latin, but altered in a way that made it difficult to decipher. "Ah, you found the ring." Mr. Higgins' voice broke the silence, causing Daniel to jump slightly. The lawyer had been sorting through some papers in the corner of the room. "This was one of your uncle's most treasured possessions," Mr. Higgins continued, peering over his glasses at the ring. "He claimed it was from the time of the Black Death. A peculiar piece indeed. Gerald was always a bit secretive about where he got it, but he believed it held significant historical value." Daniel turned the ring over in his hand, feeling its weight. Did he ever mention anything specific about it? Any stories or legends? Mr. Higgins chuckled softly. "Your uncle had many stories, most of them more fiction than fact, I suspect. But he was adamant that this ring was special, said it was a symbol of survival, a reminder of the resilience of humanity in the face of great adversity." A symbol of survival, Daniel thought, gazing at the ring. Little did he know, it was a symbol of much more than that, a link to a past so dark and terrifying that it would soon engulf his very existence. With a mixture of reverence and apprehension, Daniel slipped the ring into his pocket. The legacy of his uncle's mysteries was now his to unravel, and this ring seemed like the key to a door that had long been closed. He couldn't shake the feeling, however, that some doors were meant to remain shut. That night, Daniel's sleep was restless, his mind a tempest of fragmented images and whispers from a bygone era. In his dreams, he wandered through shadowy streets cloaked in mist, the air thick with the scent of burning herbs and the distant cries of anguish. The world around him was a blur of medieval architecture, a labyrinth of narrow cobblestone lanes that twisted and turned into the unknown. He found himself in a scene of desolation. The Black Death, in its merciless fury, had turned vibrant marketplaces into ghostly arenas of despair. People in tattered clothes moved like spectres, their faces hollowed by fear and loss. Doctors, in beak-like masks, roamed the streets, their presence a grim reminder of the unrelenting plague. Amidst this chaos, a figure stood out, strangely familiar, yet out of place. It was his Uncle Gerald, dressed in the garb of the 13th century, his eyes reflecting a haunting knowledge of the horrors around him. Gerald looked at Daniel, a cryptic smile playing on his lips, as if he knew secrets that were yet to unfold. "Daniel," his uncle's voice echoed, ethereal and distant. "The ring is not just a relic, it's a bridge to the past, a witness to the resilience and the follies of mankind." The dream shifted, and Daniel found himself walking beside his uncle through the plague-ridden streets. They passed by scenes of unspeakable sorrow, families torn apart, bodies left unattended, and the constant tolling of church bells marking yet another soul lost to the pestilence. "Observe, learn, but do not interfere," Gerald warned, his voice barely above a whisper. "The past is a delicate tapestry. A single thread pulled can unravel the fabric of time." As they walked, Daniel noticed a peculiar detail. The ring on his finger glowed with a faint, otherworldly light, pulsating in rhythm with his heartbeat. It felt alive, almost sentient, as if it were an integral part of the scene around him. Suddenly, a sharp pain jolted Daniel awake. His heart was racing, and he lay in bed, drenched in sweat, the echoes of the dream still lingering in his mind. The room was dark, the only light coming from the moon casting eerie shadows across the walls. He looked at his hand. The ring, still in his pocket from the night before, seemed to beckon him. Daniel felt a surge of apprehension mixed with an unexplainable compulsion to put it on. It was as if the ring itself was urging him to unlock the mysteries it held. With trembling hands, Daniel retrieved the ring from his pocket. The inscription seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight, its cryptic letters a silent invitation to a journey beyond the confines of time. A sense of inevitability washed over him. Daniel knew that by putting on the ring, he was stepping into the unknown, possibly altering the course of his life forever. Yet, the allure of uncovering the secrets of the past, of experiencing history firsthand, was too strong to resist. With a deep breath, he slid the ring onto his finger. The world around him began to spin, the walls of his room blurring into a vortex of light and shadow. Daniel closed his eyes, bracing himself for what was to come, as he was pulled into the depths of history, to a time where the shadow of the Black Death loomed over the land. Daniel opened his eyes to a world transformed, gone were the familiar comforts of his room, replaced by the harsh reality of a 13th century street in the throes of the Black Death. He stood in a narrow, muddy lane, flanked by timber-framed houses with thatched roofs, their once vibrant facades now dulled and decaying under the weight of despair. The air was heavy with a mix of odors, the stench of death and sickness, the smoke from fires burning fragrant woods, and herbs in a futile attempt to ward off the plague. People shuffled past him, their faces drawn and weary, eyes hollow with loss. Some wore amulets or charms, superstitious tokens of protection against the disease that ravaged their community. As Daniel took in the chaotic scene, a group of flagellants passed by, their backs bloodied from self-inflicted wounds, believing their pain would appease God's wrath and end the plague. Their haunting chants filled the air, a grim soundtrack to the unfolding tragedy. Hesitantly, Daniel approached a woman who sat by the roadside, cradling a lifeless child in her arms. Her eyes, red from weeping, met his with a mix of grief and resignation. "Forgive me, sir," Daniel began awkwardly, unsure how to address her. "I am new to this place. Can you tell me what has happened here?" The woman looked up, her voice a weary whisper. "Pestilence, sir. It has taken my child, my husband, everyone I loved. It came like a thief in the night, sparing no one, rich or poor. The doctors say it's God's punishment for our sins, but what sin did my little one commit to deserve such a fate?" Her words painted a vivid picture of the societal and religious perceptions of the time, a belief that the plague was divine retribution, a sentiment that fueled both despair and fanaticism among the people. Daniel moved on, each step taking him deeper into the heart of the medieval city. He passed by a doctor in a beak-like mask, the beak stuffed with aromatic substances to ward off the miasma of the plague. The doctor was visiting a house marked with a painted cross, signifying that the occupants inside were afflicted by the disease. Further down the street, Daniel encountered a priest, clad in somber robes, offering prayers for the dead as they were loaded onto a cart. "Bring out your dead," the cart driver called out, a chilling reminder of the countless lives claimed by the plague. "Father, how does the city cope with such loss?" Daniel asked, his historian's curiosity mingled with a deep sense of sorrow. The priest sighed, looking around at the desolate streets. "We do what we can. We pray, we offer comfort to the dying, but it is never enough. The graveyards are full. We bury them in mass graves now. It is a time of great suffering, a test of our faith and humanity." As Daniel conversed with these individuals, the harsh realities of the period became starkly clear. The lack of scientific understanding of the disease, the rampant superstitions, and the overwhelming sense of helplessness that pervaded society. Standing amidst the chaos and despair of a world centuries removed from his own, Daniel felt an overwhelming sense of disconnection. He was a spectator to history's darkest chapter, a chapter he had only read about but was now experiencing in all its brutal reality. The weight of the ring on his finger was a constant reminder of the surreal journey he had embarked upon, a journey into the heart of the Black Death. Daniel, still reeling from the visceral experience of the 13th century, found himself back in the familiar surroundings of his modern home. The contrast between the two worlds was jarring. Here, in the comfort and safety of the 21st century, the horrors of the Black Death felt like echoes from a distant nightmare, yet the images of suffering and despair he had witnessed clung to him, a haunting reminder of the past's brutal reality. Sitting in his study, surrounded by books and artifacts, Daniel felt a profound sense of responsibility. The ring, now resting heavily on his desk, was not just a gateway to the past. It was a tool, a means through which he could potentially make a difference. But how? The question gnawed at him, a puzzle that demanded to be solved. Driven by a newfound purpose, Daniel began to reach out to friends, colleagues, and experts in various fields. He spent hours in discussions with historians, delving deeper into the specifics of the Black Death, its origins, spread, and impact on society. He learned about the lack of medical knowledge at the time, the superstitions that governed people's understanding of the disease, and the sheer helplessness of physicians in the face of the plague's devastation. Seeking a more scientific perspective, Daniel consulted with doctors and epidemiologists, explaining his interest as part of a research project. They provided insights into the nature of bubonic plague, the bacteria responsible for the Black Death, and discussed how advancements in medicine could have altered the course of history. Antibiotics, they explained, could have been a game changer, stopping the disease in its tracks. But the more Daniel learned, the more he realized the complexity of his endeavor. Any interference in the past could have unforeseen consequences, potentially altering the present in ways he couldn't predict. The ethical implications were staggering. Could he justify tampering with history, even with the best intentions? One evening, after a particularly intense discussion with a medical historian, Daniel sat alone in his study, the ring glinting under the lamp's light. The historian's words echoed in his mind. The Black Death was a turning point in human history. It reshaped societies, economies, and even religious beliefs. Altering that course, who knows what ripple effects that could have on the present? Daniel pondered the gravity of his situation. The power to traverse time was an incredible gift, but it was also a burden. With every journey to the past, he risked changing something, however small, that could ripple through time and alter the present in unimaginable ways. The ring seemed to beckon him, its inscriptions a silent call to action. Daniel knew he couldn't ignore it. The historian in him was too intrigued, the humanitarian too compelled to help. But he also knew he had to tread carefully, balancing his desire to help with the responsibility of preserving the integrity of history. As he picked up the ring, a sense of determination settled over him. He would return to the 13th century, armed with knowledge and a deep respect for the delicate fabric of time. He would observe, learn, and if possible, offer aid without disturbing the course of history. With the ring snug on his finger, Daniel closed his eyes and braced himself for the journey back. The world around him began to blur, and he was once again swept into the currents of time, heading towards a past plagued by darkness, but perhaps also ripe for a glimmer of hope. As Daniel materialized in the 13th century, the air was thick with tension and fear. He found himself in the midst of a chaotic scene unfolding in the village square, where a crowd had gathered, their faces twisted in anger and suspicion. At the center stood a woman, her hands bound, her eyes wide with terror. Accusations of witchcraft hung heavy in the air, a dangerous and all too common scapegoat for the inexplicable horrors of the Black Death. Daniel's historical knowledge painted a grim picture of what was to come. During times of crisis, especially in the era of the Black Death, communities often sought to find a tangible cause for their suffering. Witch hunts became rampant, with innocent people persecuted and blamed for spreading the plague through malevolent means. As the accusers shouted their charges, claiming the woman had brought the plague upon them through sorcery, Daniel felt a surge of horror and injustice. He knew he had to intervene to try and stop the madness. Pushing through the crowd, he called out, trying to reason with them. "Listen to me. This is not witchcraft. It's a disease, a natural illness. It's not caused by magical curses," Daniel pleaded, his voice desperate. His words, however, only fueled the crowd's hysteria. Eyes turned toward him, suspicion quickly morphing into hostility. "Another witch," someone shouted, pointing an accusing finger at Daniel. "He speaks in defense of the witch. He must be one of them." Before he knew it, Daniel was seized by rough hands, dragged to stand beside the accused woman. His heart pounded in his chest as he realized the gravity of the situation. He was now caught in the very hysteria he had tried to stop. The impromptu trial was a blur of shouts and accusations. Daniel tried to defend himself, to explain his presence, but his words fell on deaf ears. The concept of a disease-causing bacteria was far beyond the comprehension of the 13th century populace, and his attempts at explanation only incriminated him further. As the verdict of witchcraft was declared and the crowd's cries for justice grew louder, Daniel felt a sense of impending doom. He knew the horrific fate that awaited those labeled as witches in this era. In a moment of desperation, Daniel's hand went to the ring. He twisted it on his finger, the familiar sensation of time shifting, enveloping him. The angry faces around him began to blur, their shouts fading into a distant echo. And then, just as quickly as he had been transported to the past, Daniel found himself back in the safety of his modern-day study. He was panting, his heart racing, the terror of the near-death experience still gripping him. The realization of what had just happened hit him hard. His attempt to change the course of history, to save an innocent life, had nearly cost him his own. The dangers of meddling with the past were now starkly clear to him. The ring, while powerful, was not a tool to be used recklessly. Daniel sat in his study, the weight of his experiences heavy on his shoulders. He gazed at the ring, now lying innocently on his desk, its metallic surface reflecting the light of his lamp. It was a portal to the past, a connection to history's darkest moments. But it was also a reminder of the delicate balance of time. With a newfound respect for the power he wielded, Daniel resolved to continue his journeys to the past, but he would do so with caution, mindful of the consequences of his actions. The past could teach him much, but it was a realm to be navigated with care and reverence. Haunted by his narrow escape from the witch trials, Daniel understood that if he was to return to the 13th century, he needed to be better prepared. He spent the following days immersing himself in research, particularly focusing on the nature of witch trials during the Black Death. Historically, the witch trials of the 13th century were a product of fear, ignorance, and superstition. The Black Death, which ravaged Europe, left people desperate for an explanation. Without the knowledge of germs or how diseases spread, communities often turned to superstition, blaming misfortune and illness on witchcraft. Accusations of witchcraft were typically directed at those who were already marginalized, often women, the elderly, or the destitute. Trials were hasty and driven by hysteria, with evidence being largely anecdotal or coerced. Confessions were often extracted through torture, and the accused were rarely acquitted. The church and secular authorities endorsed these trials, seeing them as a way to reinforce their authority amidst the chaos of the plague. Equipped with this knowledge, Daniel knew he needed to be cautious. His modern sensibilities and knowledge could easily arouse suspicion, and he had to blend in to avoid drawing attention. Before his next journey, Daniel decided to rest, knowing the mental and physical toll the travel could take. He also gathered some essentials, a change of period-appropriate clothing to blend in, some basic medical supplies like bandages and herbs, common remedies of the time, and a small collection of coins from his uncle's collection, likely to be considered valid currency in the 13th century. As he lay in bed that night, his mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and strategies. He contemplated how he could make a positive impact without altering the course of history too drastically. Could he subtly introduce better hygiene practices? Could he provide medical care without revealing his advanced knowledge? The possibilities were endless, but so were the risks. The next morning, Daniel felt a sense of resolve. He dressed in the medieval garb he had prepared and looked at himself in the mirror. It was strange seeing himself like this, as if he was looking at a character from a history book, but it was necessary for his mission. Taking a deep breath, he picked up the ring, The metal felt cool against his skin, a familiar sensation that now filled him with a mix of anticipation and apprehension. He slipped it onto his finger and closed his eyes, focusing on the 13th century, the streets of the plague-stricken town, and the people he hoped to help. The world around him began to blur, a now familiar sensation of time warping around him. When he opened his eyes again, he was back in the medieval town, the sights, sounds and smells of the 13th century enveloping him. Daniel stepped forward, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and excitement. He was back, but this time he was prepared. With a blend of caution and determination, he began to navigate the streets, ready to face the challenges of the past with the knowledge and resources of the present. The sudden impact on his head plunged Daniel into darkness. As he slipped into unconsciousness, he vaguely heard voices rifling through his belongings, the words, "Check his pockets," echoing in his fading awareness. He had been attacked, and everything he had brought with him was now gone. When Daniel awoke, it was to the cold, hard reality of the 13th century floor. The morning light filtered weakly through a nearby window, illuminating his surroundings. He felt a pang of panic as he realized that the ring, his lifeline back to the future, was missing. He wondered, with a sinking heart, why he hadn't been transported back when the ring was removed. Was it because it was now in someone else's possession? He heard the commotion outside, the sound of a gathering crowd. Peering cautiously out, he saw townsfolk dragging a woman to the town square. She was the accused witch, and they were taking her to be burned. Daniel's mind raced with panic and despair. He needed to find the ring, but first, he needed to hide and avoid drawing attention to himself. From his hiding place, Daniel watched the horrifying scene unfold with historical accuracy etched in every detail. The woman was bound to a stake erected in the center of a pile of wood, a grim and all too common sight in the medieval witch trials. The wood stack was strategically arranged to ensure a swift fire, a practice developed over years of witch burnings. The crowd, a mix of fear, anger, and morbid curiosity, gathered around, their faces reflecting the prevailing superstitions and collective hysteria of the time. A local priest was present, reciting prayers, which was typical in these executions. The church's involvement lent a sense of divine approval to the proceedings, reinforcing the belief that they were purging evil from their midst. The accused witch was given a chance to confess, though it was more a formality than a real opportunity for salvation. Her fate had been sealed the moment the accusations were made. As the executioner lit the fire, Daniel felt a wave of nausea and helplessness wash over him. The flames quickly caught, and the crowd's chants rose to a feverish pitch. The woman's cries were drowned out by the roar of the fire and the shouts of the onlookers. Daniel turned away, unable to watch the brutal end of an innocent life. He knew this was a dark chapter in human history, a time when fear and ignorance led to unimaginable cruelty. The execution served as a stark reminder of the dangers of the era he was in. Without the ring, Daniel was stranded in a time that was not his own, surrounded by suspicion and violence. He needed to stay hidden, to survive long enough to find the ring and return to his time. But as he hunkered down in his hiding spot, he couldn't shake the horrific images he had just witnessed, nor the haunting realization of the depths of human cruelty in the face of fear. As Daniel retreated from the horrific scene of the execution, a voice cut through the air, sealing his fate. "There's the other one!" a local cried out, pointing directly at him. Panic surged through Daniel as the crowd turned, their eyes alight with the same feverish mix of fear and zeal that had consumed the woman at the stake. In moments, he was surrounded and quickly subdued, unable to escape the grasp of the angry townspeople. "The witch's companion from the other day," someone shouted, Recalling his previous attempt to intervene, the accusations spread like wildfire, and Daniel found himself the focus of their frenzied accusations. A magistrate, a man of stern countenance and unyielding authority, pushed through the crowd. He eyed Daniel with a mix of suspicion and contempt, without a fair trial or a chance to defend himself. Both concepts almost non-existent in witch trials of the era. The magistrate swiftly condemned him. "To the stake with this consort of witches," he declared, and the crowd roared in approval. As they hastily built another stake, Daniel's mind raced in desperation. He tried to reason with them, to explain his true origin. "I'm from the future," he pleaded, his voice edged with panic. "I can help you. I know about this disease, how to stop it." But his words only fueled their fear and anger further. "He speaks madness, witchcraft," they cried. His knowledge of the future, meant to save him, only served to cement their belief in his guilt. Before long, Daniel was bound to the freshly built stake, the wood piled high around him. The executioner moved forward with a lit torch, and the crowd's chants reached a crescendo. Daniel's heart pounded in his chest, a mix of fear, regret, and disbelief at his impending fate. As the fire was set and the flames began to lick at the wood, a figure in the crowd caught Daniel's eye. A man stood there, wearing his ring, the same ring that had brought Daniel to this moment. The realization hit him like a wave. The ring had not been lost. It had been stolen, taken by someone who now watched him face his doom. He heard someone in the crowd speak to the man with the ring, calling him by a name that sent a shock through Daniel. It was his own surname. Could this man be an ancestor? Was this how the ring had been passed down through the generations? A family heirloom, shrouded in mystery and legend. The heat of the flames grew more intense, the smoke filling Daniel's lungs. He coughed, his eyes watering, as he strained to see the man with the ring one last time, but the smoke and the flames obscured his vision, and the faces in the crowd melted into a blur. In his final moments, Daniel's thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion, regret, and unanswered questions. The irony of his situation, a historian consumed by the very past he sought to understand, was not lost on him. His last thought was a fleeting hope that his story, his real story, might somehow survive through the ages, a cautionary tale of time, fate, and the unyielding march of history. And then, as the flames enveloped him, Daniel's world turned to ash, his story lost in the annals of time, a whisper in the wind, a past long gone. Ah, my dear nocturnal scholars of the macabre. It's time for a quick scare break. As we linger in these shadowy realms, a small favour I dare to ask. If my tales of terror bring you thrills, do not let our journey end here. Hit like, subscribe, and join our dark congregation. Now shall we delve deeper into the abyss. Let's embrace the darkness once more. Let's get back to the shadows. Today, our tale is very wet. If you've ever fancied a quick dip in an isolated lake, I suggest you think twice. As our friends find out, the waters can be very dark and cold. Do enjoy. The air in Norfolk, England, held a crisp chill as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the thick woods surrounding the Phantom Reservoir. The moon's silvery glow began to illuminate the serene lake, turning it into an otherworldly spectacle. A group of friends, led by the adventurous and curious Olivia, decided to spend a night camping at the mysterious waters. Olivia, along with her friends Jake, Emma, and Alex, trekked through the dense forest carrying their tents. their sleeping bags, and a flickering lantern that barely pushed back the encroaching darkness. They found a clearing near the lake's edge, surrounded by ancient trees whose branches whispered secrets to the night. "Isn't it beautiful?" Olivia exclaimed, her eyes reflecting the moonlit waters. "I've heard stories about this place since I was a kid. The Phantom Reservoir, they call it. Legend has it that a vengeful spirit roams these waters." Her friends exchanged nervous glances, but couldn't help being intrigued. Jake, the skeptic of the group, scoffed. "You don't actually believe in ghosts, do you? It's just an old tale to scare the kids." Emma, always the peacemaker, claimed, "Well, legends often have some basis in truth, right? What's the story behind this vengeful spirit, Olivia?" Olivia, her eyes gleaming with excitement, gathered her friends around the lantern, the shadows playing on their faces. "Legend says that in the 90s, a man was bullied relentlessly. They drove him to the brink, and one fateful night they cornered him by the lake. They say he was pushed in, held under, and drowned." The flickering lantern seemed to cast an eerie shadow on Olivia's face as she continued. "Now they say his spirit can't find peace. If anyone dares to swim in his lake, he emerges from the depths to haunt them. Swimmers who come into his path mysteriously vanish, and they can feel his hands pull them under." Alex, the quiet observant, shivered despite the warmth of the lantern. "Do you really think there's any truth to the story?" Olivia paused, her gaze fixed on the dark waters. "Who knows? But wouldn't it be thrilling to find out? We're here for an adventure after all." With a mix of excitement and trepidation, the friends set up their camp, the glow of the lantern warding off the encroaching darkness. Little did they know that the Phantom Reservoir held secrets that would soon test their courage and friendship. As they settled around the crackling campfire, the rhythmic lapping of the lake against the shore seemed to echo the unseen whispers of the past. The crackling fire cast dancing shadows as the friends, drawn by the allure of the Phantom Reservoir, decided to take a moonlit dip in the mysterious waters. Laughter echoed through the woods as they playfully splashed each other, their worries momentarily forgotten in the camaraderie of friendship. Underneath the luminescent moon, the group's carefree atmosphere turned flirtatious. The girls, Emma and Oliver, teased the guys, Jake and Alex, with a playful banter, their laughter blending with the gentle lapping of the dark waters against the shore. As the night progressed, inhibitions faded, and the girls, caught up in the liberating atmosphere, decided to take a bold step. They slipped off their bikini tops, giggling like mischievous schoolgirls under the moonlight. Just as the night seemed to be taking a turn towards romantic mischief, a sudden disturbance shattered the playful mood. Emma felt a cold, slimy touch graze her foot, causing her to jerk back with a yelp. "Something grabbed me," she explained, her voice tinged with terror. She swam frantically towards the edge of the water, her eyes wide with a mix of worry and the chilling tales they had shared earlier. The others, initially thinking it was a prank, chuckled nervously. "Come on, Emma, don't mess around," Jake called out, glancing at the others with a smirk. But Emma's expression told a different story. Her eyes darted fearfully beneath the surface of the lake, convinced that something lurked in the darkness below. Her breaths came at ragged gasps as she clambered onto the shore, her skin covered in goosebumps. As her friends tried to console Emma, their laughter turned to concern when Alex, who had been floating a bit farther out, suddenly disappeared beneath the inky surface. Panic gripped them as they shouted his name, but the water remained still, betraying no sign of his presence. In a frenzy, they dove into the water, desperately searching for any trace of Alex. The lake, however, proved to be an impenetrable void. Now we're going to have a short scare break while you ease your nerves. So while you're waiting, don't forget, if you're enjoying the content, go ahead and stab that subscribe button right now. As doing so, you'll really help the professor spread his shadow of evil Now, let's get back to the story. Its depths shrouded in darkness. Each attempt to rescue him was met with the unsettling silence of the water. With mounting fear, they swam back to the shore, their clothes clinging to their bodies. Emma, still trembling, fumbled with her phone, hoping to call for help. But to their dismay, the screens displayed the frustrating message: no signal. Disorientated and terrified, the friends huddled together on the shore, their surroundings now transformed into an ominous labyrinth of trees and shadows. The once inviting Phantom Reservoir became a haunting nightmare, concealing secrets that even the bravest among them couldn't fathom. Lost in the eerie stillness of the night, they faced the chilling reality that they didn't even know which direction would lead them out of this enigmatic place. As the friends huddled together on the shoreline, their breaths visible in the cool night air, the absence of Alex hung heavily in the atmosphere. Jake, ever the skeptic, tried to ease the tension. Maybe he swam off, or found a different spot. I didn't see any bubbles or ripples in the water. We should go look on the other side of the lake. Olivia, however, couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that settled over them. Screw that, she retorted, her voice filled with a mix of fear and frustration. Something feels very wrong here. We've made a mistake coming to this place. I knew we shouldn't have played around with those ghost stories. Emma, still visibly shaken, added, We can't just wait here. What if something happens to us too? We need to leave now. Attempting to bring a semblance of reason to the chaotic situation, Jake suggested, Let's wait until morning. It's too dark to find a way. We can head back when it's light. Reluctantly, the friends decided to endure the night, their fear keeping them close to the dwindling warmth of the campfire. The once crackling flames now seemed feeble against the overwhelming darkness that surrounded them. As the night wore on, they took turns keeping watch, each rustle in the woods sending shivers down their spines. The eerie silence of the Phantom Reservoir weighed heavily on their hearts, and every splash of water seemed to carry the echo of unseen dangers. When the first line of dawn broke through the trees, its feeble rays revealed a landscape that felt foreign and menacing. With a collective sigh of relief, the friends gathered their belongings, their eyes casting wary glances at the lake that had turned from enchanting to ominous. Without wasting another moment, they navigated through the woods, following the growing light. The morning air, crisp and refreshing, brought a slight reprieve from the haunting night. As they emerged from the tree line, the sight of a distant town provided a beacon of civilization, offering a stark contrast to the desolation of the Phantom Reservoir. Determined to put the chilling events behind them, the friends made their way to the town, their pace quickening with each step. The people of the quaint town were oblivious to the nightmarish encounter the group had endured. The friends, however, carried the weight of the Phantom Reservoir with them, forever changed by the vengeful spirit that lurked beneath its serene waters. The police station, a small but imposing structure, loomed ahead as the friends hurried through the quaint town in search of help. Anxiety gnawed at them as they pushed open the door, stepping into a room dominated by stern faces and authoritative uniforms. The officer behind the desk looked up, his expression a mix of skepticism and wariness. "What can I do for you?" he asked, eyeing the disheveled trio. Olivia, the urgency in her voice, began recounting the harrowing events of the Phantom Reservoir. "Our friend Alex, he disappeared last night. We were at the lake and something pulled him under. We tried to save him, but he never came back." The officer raised an eyebrow. "The old lake, you say? What were you doing there? Are you sure your friend didn't just walk off on his own?" Emma, desperate to convey the severity of their situation, pleaded. "No, officer, we saw something in the water. It wasn't natural. We need your help to find him." Jake, feeling vindicated, pointed at the officer. "See? I told you he might have wandered off, but I still think we should go and look for him." The officer sighed, a mix of annoyance and concern clouding his features. "All right, we'll get some officers over there to check it out. Meanwhile, you three need to stay here so we can follow up on this. Don't go anywhere." As the police mobilized to investigate the Phantom Reservoir, the friends found themselves in an uneasy limbo at the town's local pub, the King's Arms. The rustic establishment welcomed them with creaking floorboards and a lingering scent of aged wood. The innkeeper, a stout man with grizzled beard, assigned them rooms upstairs. The three friends, still gripped by the unsettling events of the night, settled into their rooms, the weight of the unknown pressing on them. Despite the warmth of the pub, an air of tension hung over their heads. The ticking of the old clock in the hallway seemed to echo the slow passage of time, leaving them to wonder about the fate of Alex and what secrets the phantom reservoir held beneath its calm surface. Emma, her nerves still on edge from the night's ordeal, headed up to her room at the King's Arms. "Guys, I need a bath," she called out to her friends as she ascended the creaking staircase. The dimly lit hallway seemed to whisper echoes of uncertainty as she approached her room. Once inside, Emma filled the bathtub with steaming hot water, hoping to wash away the lingering chill that clung to her. As she eased into the warmth, the tensions in her muscles began to dissolve, and her eyes closed in a moment of brief relaxation. The silence was broken by a sudden touch on her foot, a sensation she recognized all too well. Her eyes snapped open as she jolted upright. "What the?" she stammered, looking around the now ominous bathroom. In a surreal twist of horror, an arm emerged from the murky bathwater. The hand, its skin tinted green from the algae-rich liquid, reached out to grab Emma. Shock and terror paralyzed her as the spectral appendage coiled around her ankle and pulled her forcibly beneath the water. To Emma's disbelief, she found herself submerged, not in the bathtub, but in the cold, dark depths of the phantom reservoir. Panic set in as she saw the figure responsible for her aquatic abduction, a man, his face waterlogged and decayed, glowing with an eerie light greenish hue. His sunken eyes stared into Emma's soul, his visage terrifying beyond imagination. Summoning every ounce of strength, Emma fought against the watery spectre's grip. With a burst of adrenaline, she broke free and emerged grasping for air in a now empty bathtub. Her heart raced as she stared at the water-clogged handprint on her leg. Scratches visible where the unearthly entity had tried to pull her under. Frantically, Emma stumbled out of the bathroom and into the hallway, her wet clothes clinging to her trembling form. Bursting into her friend's room, she gasped, "I'm going. I'm not staying here. There's something in the water." Olivia and Jake, initially confused by Emma's distressed state, saw the genuine fear in her eyes. As Emma recounted her chilling encounter, the trio knew they had to leave the King's Arms and the haunted town behind them. With a renewed sense of urgency, they gathered their belongings, leaving the inn in haste, the echoes of the haunted lake still haunting their every step. Just as Olivia, Emma, and Jake were about to make their escape from the King's Arms, the police officer blocked their exit, his stern expression questioning their hurried departure. "And where do we think we're going?" he inquired, a tone of authority in his voice. Emma, still shaken from her encounter in the bathtub, took a deep breath and explained, "Something's very wrong here. There's something in the lake, something unnatural. We need to leave." The officer, undeterred, gestured towards the inn. "Let's have a seat and find out all about it, shall we? There's someone here who could use a hot drink and a place by the fire." Reluctantly, the friends followed the officer back into the King's Arms, their eyes scanning the room for any sign of the watery spectre that had haunted them. The flickering flames in the fireplace cast dancing shadows, adding an eerie touch to the atmosphere. Seated by the fire, the officer turns his attention to Jake, whose expression mirrored the confusion and fear etched across the faces of his friends. "What happened, Jake?" Olivia and Emma asked in unison. "I have no idea," Jake admitted, his voice trembling. "The officer found me by the lake. I got dragged under by a man, all waterlogged and greenish, but then I woke up with the officer over me." The officer, sensing the urgency in their eyes, decided to shed light on the mystery surrounding the phantom reservoir. "I knew him, you see," he began. "We were good friends. But you know how teens act. Some got in a fight, and he slipped. We never found his body." As the officer narrated the tragic tale of the young man who was supposed to have drowned, the friends listened in a mix of horror and fascination. The haunting details of the unresolved tragedy resonated with the legends they had heard about the vengeful spirit in the lake. The officer continued, "After that night, strange things started happening around the lake. Whispers of a spirit seeking revenge. I thought it was just town gossip until tonight. Something's not right, and I think it's connected to what happened years ago." "Well, that all sounds well and good, but we need to get out of here," Olivia declared with urgency, echoing the sentiments of her friends. The police officer, understanding the gravity of the situation, directed them to a hotel on the Norfolk coast, far enough away from the haunted lake, yet close enough to maintain contact. In the old seafront hotel, the girls occupied one room, while the boys took the other. Exhausted and haunted by the events at the Phantom Reservoir, Olivia, who hadn't slept since that fateful night, decided to attempt some rest. She lay on the bed, hoping to escape the clutches of the ominous dreams that seemed to linger over her. As Olivia slipped into the realm of sleep, the dreams seized her. She found herself submerged in the murky waters of the haunted lake, the spirit of the lake dragging her down into its depths. The water grew darker with each passing moment, and the weight of the unseen forces threatened to engulf her entirely. In the adjacent bed, Emma sensed an unease in Olivia's restless slumber. A greenish tint emanated from Olivia's mouth, a subtle trickle at first, then escalating into violent coughing. Alarmed, Emma called for the boys and they rushed to Olivia's aid. They woke her from the nightmarish dream, and Olivia, still gasping for breath, recounted the haunting vision she had experienced. "Something is very wrong here," she said, her voice trembling. "I think he's trying to tell us something." The room fell into a tense silence as the friends grappled with the inexplicable connection between the drowned man's spirit and Olivia's harrowing dreams. The echoes of the haunted lake seemed to follow them, refusing to be silenced as they struggled to unravel the enigma that had woven its way into their lives. "We're going back," declared Olivia, her voice carrying a determination that sent shivers down the spines of her friends. The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of her words hanging in the air. "I know we need to go back to the lake," she continued. "Are you crazy?" the friends explained in unison, their disbelief turning into sheer astonishment. "After everything that happened, you want to go back?" Olivia took a deep breath, attempting to convey the unexplainable connection she felt. "I saw something in my dream. He didn't speak, but he communicated in a different way. I'm not even sure what it was, but he put something in my head. We have to do this." Reluctantly, the group set out on their way back to the Phantom Reservoir, their unease growing with each step. On the outskirts of the town, they crossed paths with the police officer, who wore a stern expression upon seeing them. "You back already?" the officer questioned, his eyes narrowing with concern. He tried to dissuade them. "No good will come of it. Don't make me arrest you now, folks. I haven't been at that water's edge since, well, you know." Olivia, undeterred, met the officer's gaze. "We have to do this. There's something the spirit wants to show us. It's the only way to put things right." The officer sighed. A mixture of frustration and worry etched across his face. "Lucky for your friend, he was away from the edge when I found him. Going back there won't solve anything. It's dangerous, and you don't know what you're dealing with." Despite the officer's pleas, Olivia and her friends pressed on, driven by an inexplicable force that drew them to the haunting waters. The air around them crackled with an otherworldly energy, and the chilling tales of the Phantom Reservoir seemed to materialize before their very eyes. As they approached the lake's edge once more, the true nature of the vengeful spirit and the secrets hidden in the depths remained elusive, waiting to reveal themselves to those willing to face the unknown. As the four friends stood at the edge of the lake, Olivia broke the silence. "We need to get that officer here. I need one of you to go back and get him. Tell him it's an emergency." "I knew I'd be going to prison today," said Jake, with a resigned expression as he headed off to fetch the officer. Meanwhile, Olivia began to undress, leaving the others bewildered. She started walking into the water, and as she did, the lake around her began to glow with a greenish hue. Across the lake, a figure emerged from the same ethereal glow. It was the drowned man. He stared across the lake at Olivia for what was like an eternity. Suddenly, he vanished, and time seems to warp in his absence. Then, Just as Jake returned with the officer, the drowned man reappeared, his ghostly presence casting an otherworldly aura. "What are you doing in there, girl? Get out right now!" the officer shouted, keeping a cautious distance from the water's edge. Olivia climbed out, soaked in the greenish algae water, and approached the officer. "Give me a hand, please, sir." As the officer's hand touched Olivia's, the water dripped over his skin, glowing with an eerie light. He stared into Olivia's eyes, a realization dawning upon him. "What have you done, girl?" Without warning, Olivia was thrown aside as the drowned man, Anthony, confronted the officer. "Peter, you were my friend. Why?" Anthony's spectral voice echoed across the lake. "They made me do it. I didn't want to hold you under, but they made me," Peter pleaded, regret etched on his face. Suddenly Peter screamed, "No, no!" as he was slowly dragged into the water. "I don't mean to do this, Peter, but you made me do it." The drowned man pulled the officer into the lake, a green glow emanating from the water, and then calm settled over the phantom reservoir. In the aftermath of the supernatural confrontation, Olivia looked across the lake one last time. In the mists of the woods, she swore she saw a young man, smiling at her, before turning away and disappearing into the unknown. The spirits of the past, entwined with the living, had found resolution, and the haunting whispers of the phantom reservoir began to fade into the stillness of the night. The friends, forever changed by their encounter, departed the haunting waters, leaving behind the mysteries that now rested beneath the serene surface of the lake. Welcome back. It's lovely to see you again. A man makes the ultimate sacrifice for his very best friend. Would you do the same? I do hope you enjoy this tale. The sterile scent of antiseptic and the low hum of the fluorescent lights filled the small veterinary examination room. John sat on the cold metal chair, his hands tightly clenched, and anxiety etched across his face. His loyal companion, Max, lay on the examination table, a shadow of his former lively self. Dr. Anderson, the somber-faced veterinarian, with a gentle demeanor, entered the room, his eyes conveying the heavy news he carried. John stood up, bracing himself for the inevitable. "John, I'm afraid Max's condition has worsened," Dr. Anderson began, his voice tinged with regret. "The illness has progressed to a point where he's in significant pain and his quality of life is rapidly declining." John nodded, his throat tight with unshed tears. Max, once vibrant and full of life, now lay on the table, a mere shell of a dog he had raised from a pup. "I know how much means to you," Dr. Anderson continued empathetically. "Keeping him alive in this state would only prolong his suffering. It's a difficult decision to make, but I recommend considering euthanasia to ensure he doesn't endure any more pain." John's heart sank. A lump formed in his throat. He couldn't bring himself to say the words. The very thought of letting go, unbearable. Dr. Anderson laid a comforting hand on John's shoulder. "I'll give you some time alone with Max," the veterinarian offered, giving John a moment to gather his emotions. Alone in the room with his alien companion, John gently stroked Max's fur, feeling the frailty beneath his fingertips. Max's eyes, once bright and full of life, now had a glimmer of pain and weariness. The weight of the decision pressed heavily on John's chest. "I can't bear to lose you, Max," John whispered, tears streaming down his face. "But I can't let you suffer either." As the moments passed, John made the agonizing decision to let Max go peacefully. He nodded to Dr. Anderson, signaling that he was ready to say his final goodbyes. The vet prepared the necessary medications, and as the syringe pierced Max's skin, John whispered words of comfort to his beloved companion. "I love you, Max, always."
Max's labored breathing slowed, and his eyelids drooped. The room fell into a heavy silence as the veterinary confirmed Max's passing. With a heavy heart, John left the veterinary clinic, carrying the weight of grief as he faced an outside world without his cherished friend. Little did he know, the loss would set in motion a series of events that would challenge the very fabric of life and death itself. The days that followed Max's passing were a blur for John. The emptiness at his home echoed the absence of his four-legged companion. The once familiar sounds of paws on the floor and the joyous barking that greeted him every day were replaced by an eerie silence. Unable to shake the overwhelming grief, John found himself haunted by memories of Max. Sleepless nights and tear-stained pillows became his new reality. The pain of loss gnawed at him, pushing him to the brink of desperation. One evening, as darkness settled over the town, John sat at his computer, the soft glow of the screen illuminating his weary face. He had stumbled upon an obscure forum, a clandestine corner of the internet, rumored to hold secrets beyond the realm of the ordinary. Whispers of necromancy and forbidden rituals intrigued him. In the dim light of his study, John delved into the mysterious world of the occult, seeking a way to defy the natural order and bring Max back. The more he read, the more he became convinced that there were individuals with the power to traverse the boundaries between life and death. Guided by a newfound sense of purpose, John reached out to the contacts on the forum, seeking the assistance of those rumored to possess the forbidden knowledge he sought. Messages exchanged in hushed tones led him to a mysterious man known only as Lucius, who claimed to be a necromancer with the ability to bring back the dead. A clandestine meeting was arranged, and John found himself in a dimly lit alley, face to face with Lucius. The air grew heavy with an otherworldly presence as the necromancer spoke, his words carrying a weight that resonated with both power and warning. "Bringing back the dead comes at a price," Lucius cautioned, his eyes gleaming with an unsettling intensity. "The natural order must be balanced, and the spirits disturbed will seek retribution." Desperation overshadowed reason as John, consumed by grief, agreed to the necromancer's terms. Lucius promised to reunite him with Max, but the ominous undertone of the bargain lingered in the air. The air hung thick with an otherworldly tension as John stood with Lucius in the dimly lit, secluded space. The flickering candles cast dancing shadows on the ground, creating an eerie ambience for the ritual about to unfold. Lucius, draped in dark robes, began to chant ancient incantations, the words resonating with power that seemed to transcend the mortal realm. With a solemn nod, John agreed to the ritual, knowing that there was an unseen price to pay. Lucius handed him a ceremonial dagger, its blade glinting in the dim light. As John hesitated, he felt a shiver run down his spine, a premonition of the consequences yet to unfold. With a deep breath, John made a small incision on his palm, allowing a few drops of his own blood to fall on the ground. The ritual intensified, the air vibrating with an unnatural energy as Lucius continued his incantations. Shadows seemed to writhe and twist in response to the forbidden forces being invoked. As the ritual reached its climax, a sudden stillness fell over the space. The candles flickered, casted elongated shadows that seemed to reach out to the center of the ritual circle. Yet, there was no dramatic resurrection, no immediate sign that the supernatural had taken hold. John's heart sank, disappointment settling in as he stared at the lifeless form of Max, still laying on the ground. Doubt crept into his mind, and he questioned the wisdom of tampering with forces beyond comprehension. Lucius, undeterred, approached John, his eyes gleaming with a knowing intensity. "The resurrection process is not always immediate," He explained cryptically, "The forces at play operate on a different plane. Be patient, and all will be revealed in due time." Leaving John alone in the dimly lit space, Lucius disappeared into the shadows. The night seemed to stretch endlessly as John waited, a mix of anticipation and anxiety gnawing at him. Days passed, and John's hope waned with each passing moment. He began to question whether the ritual had been nothing more than a desperate attempt to grasp at the impossible. Doubt turned to regret, and regret to a bitter acceptance of the irrevocable loss. Then, on a cold and moonlit night, a soft whimper echoed outside John's doorstep. Startled, he opened the door to find a familiar silhouette in the shadows. There, in the pale glow of moonlight, stood Max, alive, breathing and wagging his tail. Overwhelmed with a mix of joy and disbelief, John knelt beside Max, his hands trembling as he touched the once cold fur that now pulsed with warmth. Tears welled down his eyes as he realized that, against all odds, his beloved companion had returned from the realm of the departed. In the days following Max's mysterious return, an unsettling undercurrent began to weave its way through John's once rejuvenated life. The air around Max seemed charged with an energy that John couldn't quite comprehend. Though the dog's physical appearance mirrored the Max he once knew, an intangible malevolence lurked beneath the surface. It started subtly, with Max displaying signs of restlessness and unease. He would often growl at shadows and fixate on unseen entities, his once friendly demeanor replaced by an unsettling intensity. John dismissed these behaviors as mere quirks, attributing them to the residual effects of the supernatural resurrection. The first ominous incident occurred on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. The mailman, a familiar face to Max, approached the front porch with the usual bundle of letters. Without warning, Max lunged at the unsuspecting mailman, teeth bared and a guttural growl emanating from his throat. John rushed outside, desperately pulling Max away as the mailman stumbled back, bewildered and frightened. Deeply troubled by the sudden aggression, John apologized profusely to the mailman, chalking it up to an inexplicable lapse in Max's behavior. Little did he know that this was only the beginning. Now we're going to have a short scare break while you ease your nerves. So while you're waiting, don't forget, if you're enjoying the content, go ahead and stab that subscribe button right now. As doing so, you'll really help the professor spread his shadow of evil. Now, let's get back to the story. A week later, John invited his close friend, Alex, over for dinner. As they sat in the living room, reminiscing about old times, Max's demeanor shifted once again. Without any apparent provocation, Max lunged at Alex, teeth sinking into his arm. Shocked and in pain, Alex recoiled, the warmth of friendship replaced by confusion and fear. John, torn between loyalty to his friend and the inexplicable actions of his once beloved dog, struggled to contain Max. The aggression seemed uncharacteristic, and the wounds inflicted by Max's bite were a painful testament to the dark forces that now seemed to control him. As the days passed, John couldn't shake the growing sense of foreboding that surrounded Max. The canine eyes, once filled with warmth, now gleamed with an unsettling intelligence that transcended the natural order. The connection between Max's resurrection and the malevolent behavior became undeniable. Late one night, John awoke to a strange noise emanating from the living room. He found Max standing in the darkness, a low growl reverberating through the stillness. As John approached, a profound sense of evil washed over him. He recoiled, realizing that once familiar presence of his beloved dog was now tainted by something far more sinister. In the shadows, Max's eyes glowed with an eerie intensity, and John felt a shiver crawl down his spine. The realization struck him like a cold gust of wind. Whatever had returned from beyond the veil of death was not truly Max. Max's malevolence, once directed at humans, now extended to the unsuspecting pets that roamed the area. One fateful afternoon, as John took Max for a walk in a nearby park, the malevolent force within his beloved dog manifested with a chilling intensity. A playful, fluffy retriever ambled towards Max, its tail wagging in friendly anticipation. In an instant, Max's demeanor shifted from calm to ferocious. He lunged at the unsuspecting dog, a snarl escaping from his throat. The bark echoed with terrified yelps as Max attacked, leaving the once happy canine companion bloodied and battered. John, horrified by the sudden burst of violence, struggled to restrain Max. Passers-by gasped and shouted for help, their shocked faces reflecting the disbelief of witnessing such unbridled aggression. With immense effort, John managed to pull Max away, but the incident left a chilling realization in its wake. Max was a danger, not only to humans, but to all living things. Later that evening, the darkness within Max escalated to a horrifying climax. In the confines of their home, Max's once playful eyes bore into John with a sinister glint. Without warning, the dog lunged at John, teeth bared, an eerie growl escaping from his throat. John, in self-defense, grappled with Max, the struggle a twisted mirror of their once affectionate interactions. Realizing the danger Max posed, John managed to lock him in a room, barricading the door with a heavy piece of furniture. His mind raced, torn between the love he once had for Max and the undeniable malevolence that now consumed him. In a desperate bid to understand and control the supernatural forces at play, John reached for his phone. After a series of frantic calls, John found himself once again in contact with Lucius, the necromancer. Desperation and fear dripped from his voice as he explained the escalating horror of Max's actions. Lucius listened, his tone carrying an ominous weight. "The forces you tampered with cannot be easily subdued," Lucius explained coldly. "The only way to break the malevolent bond is through sacrifice. The balance must be restored, and only the offering of a soul can quell the darkness that now consumes your companion." A heavy silence hung in the air as John processed the chilling revelation. Sacrifice, an unimaginable act that demanded the ultimate price. The weight of the decision pressed upon him as he grappled with the realization that to save others, he might have to sacrifice himself. The memories of joyous days and unconditional companionship flooded John's mind as he stood at the precipice of an unimaginable decision. The bond he shared with Max was forged through countless moments of loyalty and love. Max had been his confidant, his source of comfort, and the one constant presence in his life. In the quiet solitude of his home, surrounded by the echoes of Max's once playful barks, John wrestled with the torment of an impending sacrifice. The choice laid bare before him, the ultimate act of love to free his companion from the malevolent forces that now gripped him. Torn between the unbearable pain of parting and the knowledge that Max's existence had become a twisted semblance of life, John confronted the stark reality of his decision. As he looked into Max's eyes through the locked door, the gleam of malevolence lingered, and a shiver ran down his spine. With a heavy heart, John steeled himself for the sacrifice. Memories of Max's exuberant puppyhood, the shared walks, and the silent companionship during the darkest hours fueled his resolve. Every wag of Max's tail and every glance of unconditional love etched themselves into John's consciousness. As the moon cast a pale glow through the window, John approached the locked room. The air was thick with sorrow, and a tear slid down his cheek as he whispered his final words to Max through the door. "I love you, Max. I always will." John opened the door, and Max, sensing the solemnity of the moment, regarded him with an almost understanding gaze. In the hushed stillness, John embraced Max for the last time. The room seemed to hold its breath as John, with a heavy heart, uttered the words that would seal his fate. "I offer my soul for you, Max. may you find peace beyond this darkness." In that moment of profound sacrifice, a quiet calm settled over the room. The malevolent energy that had gripped Max receded, as if acknowledging the weight of the sacrifice made in the name of love. As the echoes of the ritual subsided, John felt a profound emptiness envelop him. He had willingly given up a part of himself, not out of desperation, but as a testament to the love that transcended the boundaries of life and death. Max, freed from the malevolent forces, lay peacefully on the floor, his once troubled eyes now serene. In the wake of the sacrifice, John felt a bittersweet sense of closure. He had relinquished a part of his own existence to spare his beloved companion from a fate worse than death. The room, once haunted by shadows, now held a somber tranquility. With a heavy heart, John whispered a final farewell to Max, embracing the profound sacrifice he had made in the name of an undying bond. As he closed the door, the weight of loss and love lingered in the stillness, a testament to the extraordinary lengths one would go to preserve the purity of a cherished connection. Days after John's sacrifice, a concerned friend arrived at his home, unaware of the profound events that had unfolded within. The door creaked open, revealing a stillness that hung heavy in the air. The friend called out, the sound of their voice breaking the silence. As they ventured deeper into the house, they discovered the scene that unfolded in the room where the sacrifice had taken place. There, lying side by side, were the lifeless forms of John and Max. The friend, overcome with grief and confusion, knelt beside them, a heavy sadness settling over their heart. In the dim light, the bond between man and dog endured even beyond the mortal realm. John's final act of love had broken the malevolent forces that had ensnared Max, leaving them both at peace. The room, once tainted by supernatural energies, now held a solemn tranquility, as if the sacrifice had forged a bridge to a realm beyond human understanding. As the friend grieved for the loss of the two cherished souls, a quiet rustle drew their attention. At the entrance of the room stood a mysterious figure, draped in dark robes. The friend, startled by the sudden presence, looked up with questioning eyes. The necromancer, Lucius, spoke in a voice that echoed with ancient wisdom. "The sacrifice restored the balance, and the darkness has been quelled. In the name of love, a soul willingly offered itself to protect another." With a swift and purposeful movement, Lucius approached John's lifeless form. He bent down, his hands emanating an otherworldly glow as he whispered incantations that only the spirits could comprehend. In that moment, the ethereal connection between the living and the departed unfolded. As the lifeless bodies of John and Max were lifted from the earthly realm, carried by unseen forces, Lucius remained a stoic guardian of the transition between the worlds. The friend, awestruck by the mysterious events that unfolded, could only watch as the necromancer performed the final rites. The room, now devoid of its occupants, held a profound silence. The supernatural energies that once permeated the space seemed to dissipate, leaving behind a sense of closure and peace. In the wake of an extraordinary sacrifice, the veil between life and death had been woven with the threads of love, binding the destinies of man and companion in an eternal embrace. As Lucius departed into the shadows, the door closed gently behind him. The neighborhood, forever changed by the supernatural tale, settled into a quiet calm. The story of John's sacrifice and the bond that defined the limits of existence became a whispered legend, a testament to the enduring power of love that could traverse even the darkest realms. And so, in the quiet aftermath of an extraordinary journey, the memory of Max and John lingered in the hearts of those who bore witness to his tale, a haunting melody that reminded them of the delicate dance between the living and the departed, forever entwined in the tapestry of an extraordinary, otherworldly love.
The day started like any other for Alex. Parents had gone for the weekend. He relished the solitude of the quiet house. The evening descended into darkness, and the subtle hum of appliances gradually faded as the lights flickered and finally succumbed to a blackout. The sudden silence was deafening. Alone in the dimly lit room, Alex fumbled for a flashlight and stumbled over to the window. The neighborhood was engulfed in an inky blackness, the only source of light emanating from the distant stars. The blackout seemed to cast an eerie spell over the familiar surroundings, transforming the once cozy home into a labyrinth of shadows. With a sigh, Alex retreated to the sanctuary of his room, clutching the flashlight like a talisman against the encroaching darkness. In the quiet solitude, an unsettling feeling crept over him, a sense of being watched by unseen eyes. Determined to shake off the unease, Alex decided to distract himself with an old friend, the television. Forgetting the blackout, he walked over to his old ancient TV and pressed the button as it crackled to life. Its screen bathed the room in a faint glow, flipping through channels, yielded nothing but static until an unexpected surge. The screen settled on an old childhood show, Puppetville Playhouse. The characters, once vibrant but long forgotten, danced across the screen. Alex's gaze locked on the puppet resembling his childhood friend, Sarah. The puppet's eyes seemed to pierce through the screen, and a strange awareness lingered in its movements. A chill ran down Alex's spine as the characters in the show slowed their antics, turning their attention toward the viewer. A low whisper, barely audible, escaped the TV speakers. "Alex." It seemed to murmur, a haunting familiarity in the voice. Heart pounding, Alex strained to listen as the characters in the show spoke of a secret, a memory buried deep within the recesses of their shared past. The room grew colder, shadows coalescing into sinister forms that mimicked the puppetry on the screen. The line between reality and the show blurred. Alex could feel the puppet friend beckoning him closer. As the whispers grew louder, the revelation loomed. Sarah was not what she seemed. Torn between fear and curiosity, Alex leaned in, captivated by the unfolding nightmare. The once forgotten friend was a puppet no more. Instead, a shadowy figure emerged, elongated limbs stretching toward the screen, eager to bridge the gap between dimensions. As Alex stumbled backwards, disorientated and terrified, as the room dissolved into an abyss of darkness, the flashlight clattered to the floor, its feeble beam flickering and casting eerie shadows that seemed to writhe with a life of their own. Panic gripped Alex as he realized the boundaries between the show and his reality had disintegrated, leaving him vulnerable to the malevolent force that now loomed over the house. In the oppressive blackness, Alex's instincts kicked in as he fumbled to his feet. Desperation fueled his every movement, and he stumbled through the void, desperately seeking refuge from the encroaching shadows. The house, once a haven, felt like a labyrinth closing in on him. The whispers persisted, an insidious chorus that echoed through the hollow spaces. "You can't escape, Alex," the disembodied voice taunted, its tone a sinister melody that seemed to seep through the very walls. Every attempt to flee only intensified the presence of the unseen puppeteer, the shadows coiling tighter around his consciousness. Darting into the kitchen, Alex slammed the door shut, hoping to muffle the haunting whispers, but the voice persisted, now a haunting murmur emanating from the walls themselves. Cabinets rattled and the refrigerator hummed in an eerie synchrony with the malevolent whispers. The kitchen, once a place of comfort, now felt like a cage. Frantically, Alex moved from room to room, seeking refuge in familiar corners of the house, but the shadows, relentless in their pursuit, clung to every space like an ominous shroud. The voice, a haunting spectre, whispered secrets of the past, each revelation more unsettling than the last. In a dim glow, Alex huddled in the corner of his room, clutching the flashlight like a lifeline. The voice, now an omnipresent force, seemed to emanate from the very air. "You can't escape the truth, Alex," it whispered, a spectral echo that reverberated through the room. With trembling hands, Alex covered his ears, desperate to block out the relentless whispers. The room pulsated with an otherworldly energy, and the barriers between reality and nightmare continued to blur. Shadows danced across the walls, taking on grotesque forms of the puppet characters that had once been innocent playmates. In a final act of desperation, Alex clamped his eyes shut, as if shutting out the visual stimuli would silence the haunting voice. Yet, even in the darkness behind closed eyelids, the whispers persisted, infiltrating the recesses of his mind. The house, now a suffocating maze of shadows and secrets, seemed to close in on Alex. The voice, a malevolent companion, echoed with the promise that there was no escape from the truth lurking in the shadows. As the whispers intensified, a chilling realization dawned on Alex. No corner of the house could shield him from the relentless pursuit of the forgotten friend. As the night wore on, the oppressive darkness that had gripped the house began to lift. The distant glow of streetlights seeped through the curtains, revealing a seamlessly ordinary home. The hum of appliances returned, and the flickering shadows retreated, leaving Alex in an uneasy calm. Relieved, Alex cautiously ventured out from his corner, the flashlight still clutched tightly in hand. The TV, now silent and dark, appeared innocuous, as if the twisted puppetry of the forgotten friend had never transpired. Doubt crept into Alex's mind. Had it all been an hallucination? A product of the unsettling combination of isolation and imagination? In an attempt to dispel the lingering unease, Alex hesitantly reached for the light switch. The room flooded with warm illumination, banishing the remnants of the shadowy spectre. The house seemed to exhale a sigh of relief, returning to the familiar comfort of everyday life. As Alex began to convince himself that the horrors were nothing more than a bizarre manifestation of fear, a sudden jolt interrupted the fragile peace. The phone, silent throughout the ordeal, rang with an urgency that echoed through the now quiet house. Heart pounding, Alex approached the ringing device, the unease returning. Answering the phone, Alex heard a familiar voice on the other end. Sarah's voice. A shiver ran down his spine as Sarah spoke with an eerie calmness. "Alex, you've seen the truth. You can't run from it. You must face the shadows." Her words carrying an unsettling weight. Confused and desperate for answers, Alex pleaded for clarification. "What do you mean? What shadows? What do I have to do?" Sarah's response was cryptic, laden with a sense of impending doom. "Return to where it all began. Face the puppeteer, and only then will the shadows release their hold. The truth cannot be escaped." Before Alex could press for more information, the line went silent. A sense of foreboding settled over him as he stood in the now well-lit room. The shadows, seemingly banished, lingered at the edge of his vision. With trepidation, Alex made his way to the window, peering out into the night. The streetlights flickered once, twice, and then plunged the neighborhood into darkness once more. The blackout, a malevolent encore, descended like a suffocating veil, extinguishing the facade of normality. Alone in the dimness once again, Alex felt the weight of the revelation pressing down. The phone call, Sarah's cryptic message, and the returning blackout signaled that the nightmare was far from over. The house, now a battleground between reality and the supernatural, seemed to pulse with a sinister energy as Alex braced himself for the next harrowing chapter in the unraveling mystery. The blackout lingered, and Alex found himself in an otherworldly void, caught between the reality of his room and the surreal dimensions of Puppetville. The transition had been seamless, as if the fabric of the show had absorbed him whole. Colours were vivid, yet distorted, and the once two-dimensional characters now moved with a disconcerting sense of depth. As Alex tried to make sense of his surroundings, a haunting familiarity settled in. He stood on the cobbled streets of Puppetville, the puppet characters frozen in their perpetual state of play. The air was thick with an unnatural stillness, and the buildings loomed like spectral props on a twisted stage. Panicking, Alex screamed out, but his voice seemed to dissolve into an eerie silence. The characters, once lively and animated, stared with empty eyes that betrayed no recognition. It became apparent that this was not a mere visitation, but a prison within the puppeteer's malevolent creation. Back in the real world, the parents returned home to a house shrouded in darkness. Concern etched lines of worry on their faces as they fumbled for the flashlight and searched each room, calling out for Alex. The remnants of the blackout added an extra layer of confusion, leaving the house in a disorienting state of half-light. As they ventured into the living room, the TV flickered with an eerie glow. On the screen, the distorted images of Puppetville played out, and among the puppet characters, a figure resembling Alex stood frozen. The parents' hearts, pounding with a mix of relief and dread, stared at the surreal scene. "He's in there, on the TV!" the mother exclaimed, her voice a mixture of disbelief and fear. The father, more pragmatic, approached the television with a furrowed brow. As his hand reached for the power button, a pang of uncertainty gripped him. The distorted figure on the screen seemed almost too lifelike, a haunting mimicry of their child. Hesitation lingered in the air as the father pressed the power button, plunging the room into darkness once again. The TV screen went black, and the echoes of the Puppetville were silenced. The parents, left in the pitch-black room, exchanged worried glances. It was as if the bizarre tableau had never existed, and they were left to grapple with the unsettling notion that their child might be lost in the shadows between reality and the twisted realm of the forgotten friend. In the blackened void of Puppetville, Alex felt a profound sense of isolation. The puppet characters remained frozen, and the cobbled streets stretched endlessly in all directions. The desperate hope of being reunited with his parents seemed to dissipate, replaced by the chilling realization that escape from this surreal nightmare would now be impossible. Deep in the woods of a small town, there lived a group of people known as the Cat People. They were mysterious, rarely seen by any of the townsfolk. It was said that they were cursed to take the form of a cat when the moon was full. The Cat People were known to be quite reclusive, never allowing any outsiders into their midst. But one night, a brave traveller ventured into the woods, curious to get a glimpse of the mysterious Cat People. He had heard the tales, and he wanted to see for himself if there was any truth to them. As the traveller made his way through the woods, he noticed a strange feeling that seemed to fill the air. He felt as though he was being watched, but he dared not turn around. He kept walking until he reached a clearing in the woods and saw the cat people. The cat people were a group of about 20 individuals all standing in a circle. They were all wearing long robes and had their hoods pulled up, obscuring their faces. As the traveller moved closer, he noticed that each of them had a pair of glowing yellow eyes. The traveller's heart began to race as he realized what he was seeing. He had heard stories about the cat people, but he had never really believed them. But here he was, standing in the presence of the mysterious cat people. The cat people stared at the traveller for a few moments before one of them stepped forward and spoke. In a deep, mysterious voice, the cat person said, "Welcome, traveller. We have been watching you for some time. Now that you have seen us, you cannot turn back. We are the cat people, and we are cursed to take the form of cats when the moon is full." The traveller was stunned. He had heard the stories, but he had never expected to actually see the cat people. He opened his mouth to speak, but the cat person cut him off. "Do not speak," said the cat person. "We have been waiting for you. You are the one who can break our curse. You must perform a ritual that will return us to our human forms. It will take all of your courage and strength, but if you succeed, our curse will be broken and we will be free." The traveller was terrified, but he was also filled with a sense of purpose. He had found the cat people, and now he knew what he had to do. With a deep breath, he stepped forward and began the ritual. As the ritual progressed, the traveller could feel a powerful energy emanating from the cat people. As their ritual came to an end, the cat people began to change. Their bodies became human and their yellow eyes faded away. The traveller felt strange. He could see that the cat people had changed, but something was amiss. The person now standing before him began to laugh. "Thank you, traveller. The curse can never truly be lifted, only transferred." The traveller looked down, only to see dark black hair sprouting from his hands. Realization set in. The traveller now possessed the curse of the cat people. He would now be stuck in the woods, cursed, until another arrived to replace him. And if you're still looking to fulfill your thirst for more horror, don't forget to check out this next video. Unless, of course, you're frozen with fear already.